Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm Jon Macri, joined as always for these start-sit shows by the great Nic Bodiford. Nick, injuries are piling up, bye weeks are factoring in, start-sit decisions now become more crucial than ever, right? Here as we kind of reach this time of the fantasy football season. So how you doing? You ready to get the good folks ready here for week 5?
Yes, I am. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm excited for another week of football, and it's it's always kind of a tough time of year. Like I said, the injury stuff is really frustrating, and then you add bye weeks to that, and then there's just like a million different things that can go wrong. But that's what we're here for, right? To try to help sort through this the mess that could be some of our options here on in week 5. But yeah, like I said, this is kind of like, again, same kind of thing that we've been doing. We're going to go through some of our favorite like QB and defensive special team streamers, wide receiver cornerback matchups, man zone data, O-line, D-line matchup information, as well as some of the handpicked players from Nate's Start Sit article that we'd like to highlight, all of which you can now get access to on pff.com with a PFF Plus subscription. And I can finally share this exciting news as well. If you are a PFF Plus subscriber, you will now have access to in-game grades and snap counts as they happen and as they are collected by the best team data collection team in the multiverse here at PFF. That is some very exciting stuff that I know we've been looking to do for a very long time. So you can now pop into our premium stats page while the games are being played to see kind of how players are grading as they're graded live and prior to review, and get a better feel for who is and isn't performing well. And a big part of that is getting access to the snap counts as we collect them as well. So getting to see that usage as it happens is huge in my opinion. So make sure you have a subscription to PFF Plus, and you'll get access to that as well as all the top-notch articles and tools to help you dominate your fantasy leagues as well. All right, Nick, let's get started here. And we're running it back with one of our big hits from last week, finished as the QB1 overall for the week. He's back. Justin Fields is your first QB streamer of the week.
Yeah, so also some news here. Looks like Malik Neighbors is not progressing through the concussion protocol very effectively right now, just getting like live alerts. So maybe that's something we touch on later on. But it's going to be 17 targets for Wandale, totaling 66 yards. All right, Justin Fields, though. Pittsburgh Steelers versus Dallas Cowboys. Dallas lost starting edge rushers Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. Shout out to you, John Owning. I am so sorry. Our beloved editor here. And anyway, okay, so Parsons takes with him 21 of Dallas's 66 quarterback pressures. DeMarcus Lawrence not as efficient in the quarterback pressure department, but he does own 3 of Dallas's 7 sacks. Justin Fields continues to show improvement as a passer. Among 36 NFL quarterbacks with at least 15 qualifying dropbacks, Fields ranks 10th in accuracy rate and 5th in accuracy plus rate. The dude is putting everything together. Now, maybe smaller sample size just based on the way that Tomlin and Arthur Smith are running the offense is giving him a bit of a boost, but that's not changing. So he's going to continue to be efficient on, moderate passing volume. We also saw him run the ball very effectively. Fields, I think from here on out, is a quarterback 1. We're just diagnosing what type of quarterback 1. Given Dallas's injury woes, I think Fields is going to be very comfortable in the pocket this week. So if he's out there available in your league, you can add him as a weekly QB1 right now. And then hopefully, we won't be allowed to talk about him anymore in this section.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think he is kind of starting to lock himself into that QB1 range. And like you said, Dallas without Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, that's huge. Those are, even as if Lawrence hasn't been what he was in his prime, like still 2 of Dallas's best pass rushers. They're 2 best pass rushers, really. And Fields too, like from a clean pocket, 83.1 passing grade, which is 7th best among quarterbacks. He's thrown 3 touchdowns, just 1 interception. Also 4 big time throws and 0 turnover worthy plays from a clean pocket. So if Dallas can't get the pass rush going against the Steelers, which I don't expect them to have a lot of success there without Parsons and without DeMarcus Lawrence, then Fields should be able to operate nicely and deliver a nice performance here. And then you look at Dallas's run defense, great as well, ranks dead last, 37.7. So if Fields, has the chance to run with the ball, like he's going to be able to take off as well. So like that quite a bit. All right, Nick, one of our favorite players to talk about on this show, because he's been such a good streaming option, still available in over 50% of leagues, because he's been a repeat name on the waiver wire show as well. Threw for nearly 400 yards on Monday Night Football. We're like Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks once again, Nick.
Yeah, and I think that his waiver wire window is probably closing too. Whenever we see guys crush it in island games, that tends to increase the rostership rate. So get him if you can. Your league mates are going to pick him up. So Geno Smith facing the New York Giants. The only thing I don't like about this one is that they may go into a run heavy mode as they blow out the Giants, but I think he's still going to play very, very efficiently. So I've got him right on the QB1, QB2 border. We'll see how things settle at the end of the week. Would love it if Malik Neighbors is active for Geno Smith, because he's, an explosive offensive weapon. Anyway, Geno Smith, 2024 passing data among 36 NFL quarterbacks with at least 25 dropbacks, 6th in PFF passing grade, 10th in yards per passing attempt, 2nd in completion rate, 3rd in average time to throw, and 4th in turnover-worthy play rate. The New York Giants defense ranks 12th in explosive pass plays allowed, 17th in yards allowed per coverage snap, and 30th in catch rate allowed. That means really bad. I think he's just going to play efficiently. Now, the Giants, we're going to get to this in a little bit because they have some defensive injuries that we're going to need to talk about in the coverage unit. But again, Geno, he's going to continue to be efficient. Volume could be the issue, but I will take the good player in the good situation and, just expect the rest to fall into place.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you laid it out perfectly there, hit on all the points. So I like Geno quite a bit as well. And then last name for me, as far as quarterbacks go, I know this is like the QB streamer section of the show, but for those people like tuning in for, data nuggets to utilize in like DFS or betting props, anything like that, I wanted to highlight a potential high-end QB play for this week. And it's Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers going against the Arizona Cardinals. He's coming off like a quieter week, right? But to me, this week in a prime position to deliver a potential top 5 performance going against Arizona. And here's why. So from a clean pocket, Brock Purdy owns an 87.5 passing grade. That is the best mark in the league. He's also thrown for more passing yards, 881, than any quarterback from a clean pocket. Now, 49ers offensive line, they've been just an average pass blocking unit, 16th in pass blocking grade, allowed a QB knockdown rate of just 6.8%, which is 13th best. But the advantage really comes facing this Arizona Cardinals defensive line, which ranks 28th in pass rush grade with a 56.1. And they've generated just a 25.8% pressure rate, which is 29th this season. So Brock Purdy's 79.5% adjusted completion rate. I also want to highlight from a clean pocket, it only ranks 14th, but he's also the only quarterback among the top 25 in that regard to have an average depth of target above even 9 yards. And his average depth of target from a clean pocket is 10.8. So feeling, pretty good about airing the ball out when he's got time and space. And I think just combining that kind of willingness to throw deep when he's kept clean, his high-end ability to do so, and the Cardinals also ranking just 28th in team coverage grade. This is the kind of matchup that has the makings of a potential top 5 week for Brock Purdy.
No notes.
Beautiful. All right, let's go to actually, before we go on, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at DraftKings first. TD Tutty taking it to the house, in for 6, whatever you call a touchdown. One thing's for sure, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook. Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the Sportsbook app and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to bet $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. All right, let's get into the wide receivers now and start with a look at your wide receiver cornerback matchups to target this week. Nick, who is the first name on the list for you?
Okay, first name on the list is Jacksonville Jaguars rookie wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. versus Indianapolis Colts cornerback Jalen Jones. So Jalen Jones, looking through his wide receiver assignments thus far this year, he plays on the perimeter, tends to handle big receivers, particularly ones that run downfield, although sometimes they keep them in the intermediate range as well. Gabe Davis will get some opportunities. I think he's got a shoulder thing. I don't know actually what his status is right now, but Gabe Davis, he'll play against Jones from time to time. But like this matchup for Brian Thomas Jr. Why? Because of a few things. One, I took a play out of your book among 62 NFL wide receivers with at least 65 receiving snaps against zone coverage. Thomas ranks 13th in target rate, 9th in yards per out run, and ties for 17th in explosive pass plays rate. And Indianapolis does a whole lot of zone coverage. So I like that there just from a schematic perspective. Also, Thomas is just lapping his wide receiver or overall pass catcher competition here. Thomas notably ranks number 1 among Jacksonville wide receivers in target rate and yards per out run when lined up on the perimeter, and respectively ranks 2nd and 1st in target rate and yards per out run when lined up in the slot. As for Jalen Jones, among 65 NFL perimeter quarterbacks with at least 55 perimeter coverage snaps, Jones ranks outside the top 45 in targeted rate, catch rate allowed, yards allowed per coverage snap, and explosive pass plays allowed rate. Dude's just getting dusted, and we have a man who can nearly fly. So I don't want to overthink stuff. Trevor Lawrence, maybe they ought to give Mac Jones a chance. I don't know if that'd be a real big bummer. But Brian Thomas, yes, he works downfield. It's a little bit more volatile, but this is just kind of do you have him on the roster? Good. So you're cool with risk? Great. Do you see Jalen Jones sucks? Yes. All right, let's roll the dice here.
Yeah, no, this is a great call. Like I love Brian Thomas Jr. this week. I highlighted him in the wide receiver man zone report for the same reasons that you said. I know even Nate included him as a start sit in his. So all three of us have highlighted him somewhere this week. What could go wrong there? It's like when the pregame TV panel picks all the same team to win and as the kiss of death. But no, I'm all in on Brian Thomas Jr. and not concerned about him producing a dud because the matchup is so good. I mean, like you said, looking at the Colts defense, they are one of the most zone-heavy defenses in the league. They've allowed a 40.2% first down plus touchdown rate, 7.25 yards per coverage snap, and 9.2 yards per coverage target, all of which are bottom 5 marks in the league for zone defenses. And then, like you said, Brian Thomas Jr. among wide receivers with at least 50 routes versus zone coverage. He ranks 15th in fantasy points per route run, 10th in yards per route run. And yeah, he's just been a star, or 9th in yards per route run, like you said. I'm considering him a high-end option this week for sure. Okay, next one up, one of the hot waiver wire targets from this past week. Who's the next guy in your wide receiver cornerback matchup?
Yeah, so he would have been in the waiver, what to do with your waiver wire or whatever that anagram he came up with.
Come on, WDWDWOWWW.
Thank you. Los Angeles Rams rookie Jordan Whittington. He's good versus Green Bay Packers backup cornerback Corey Ballantyne. So starting with Whittington, last week led the receiving corps with 59 offensive snaps, and he lined up wide right on a 39% snap plurality. So what does that mean? He is likely to face Corey Ballantyne, number 4 cornerback for the Green Bay Packers, who is the current starting defensive left coverage defender. Why is he doing that? Because, so my notes here, Green Bay Packers number 1 cornerback Jair Alexander almost returned or almost played through a quadriceps strain last week in week 4, but he injured his groin on Thursday, was unable to play. Even if he plays, he's not going to be 100%, but he is not guaranteed to suit up this week. Then number 3 cornerback, Carrington Valentine, now dealing with a recurring ankle sprain. He is also at least in questionable. I know questionable tags are a little bit weird nowadays, but I expect neither of these guys to play. We'll see what ends up happening, but I think that Whittington is going to get a lot of opportunities against Corey Ballantyne, who ranks outside the top 80 in yards allowed per coverage snap and explosive pass plays allowed rate among 91 NFL cornerbacks with at least 20 perimeter coverage snaps. He has yet to force an incompletion. Now, Whittington, he's just playing well. Like, I think that he's just established himself as a good player in this Rams offense. I think that they've unearthed another startable, like NFL starter, which is really cool to see. And I think, maybe if everybody gets healthy, he'll unseat Demarcus Robinson. We'll see. There's still a long way to go here. But Whittington's 71.4 PFF receiving grade ranks 28th among 103 wide receivers with at least 54 receiving snaps. Whittington, and then Green Bay, they also just on the whole really not doing a great job in their defensive coverage. 24.1% explosive pass plays allowed rate to opposing slot receivers, where Whittington is also getting ample opportunities. So I like this one for Jordan Whittington.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. And at first, I'd like to say, as far as the Green Bay Packers go, having 2 cornerbacks, one named Corey Ballantyne and the other one named Carrington Valentine.
What the hell?
That's insane to me. Like, there's no way to kind of differentiate those two. But yeah, it's a good call. And I even highlighted Whittington in the wide receiver man zone report this week, just on a smaller sample size. But the Packers have played like a slightly above average rate of zone coverage this year. They rank a bit below average in like a lot of the team coverage metrics, including a 44% defensive success rate. That's 22nd. 8 yards allowed per coverage target, also 22nd, and a 37.6 first down and touchdown rate allowed. That's 27th. So haven't been great there. And then you look at Whittington, he actually leads the team's active wide receivers in target rate versus zone. That's led to 12 total targets, which is the second most on the team behind only Cooper Kupp, who has 19. So could be a nice little flex play this week if you were able to pick him up, especially with all the injuries and the bye weeks going on. Okay, Nick, hey, look, we're in lockstep this week with some of our picks, and another player, actually him and a teammate that I highlighted in man zone this week as well. And you like him in wide receiver cornerback matchup for Dontavian Wicks of going against the Los Angeles Rams. Yeah.
So, this is a little bit of week 5 chalk here, but Dontavian Wicks, I think that the only reason that he hasn't been part of the wide receiver rotation is that they just see him and Christian Watson, at least like pre-snap, very similarly, and that they've invested so much draft capital in Watson. They use them in different areas of the field. It's very weird, but like it's clear that Wicks is either the best receiver on this team to me or the second best behind Jaden Reed. Anyway, his primary coverage foe this week is expected to be Los Angeles Rams cornerback Kobe Durant. Touching on Wicks just over the last year plus, among 85 NFL wide receivers with at least 395 receiving snaps from week 1, 2023 to week 4, 2024, Wicks ranks 35th in yards per run, 31st in target rate, ties for 25th in yards after catch per reception, ranks 10th in explosive pass plays allowed rate, and ranks 2nd in missed tackles forced per reception, 0.29. He's a monster. Get the ball in his hands, and this guy just does good stuff. As for Durant, among 65 NFL perimeter cornerbacks with at least 55 perimeter coverage snaps, Durant ranks 39th in targeted rate, 52nd in forced incompletion rate, and 61st in defensive success rate. Los Angeles also allows the 7th highest explosive pass plays allowed rate, 15.6%. The whole industry is in on Wicks this week, so I know I'm not reinventing the wheel, although I was on him before a lot of people like 2 years ago or whatever. But yeah, Wicks, he's super talented. This is just a fun opportunity where it's going to be neat when we have these cool matchups where we like one guy, Jordan Whittington, on one side of the ball, and then we really like another guy. It's like, this is just a game that I want to sit down and watch. So cool opportunity. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's Wicks wherever we got up. I feel like we're starting him. I mean, looking at the Rams defense too, like it's just a nice matchup for him. They're a top 10 team as far as zone coverage rate goes, but they're like bottom 5 in a lot of the coverage metrics. So defensive success rate, yards allowed per reception, bottom 3 in yards allowed per coverage snap, and yards per coverage target. So a exploitable defense to say the least. And Dontavian Wicks specifically, like he's performed at a top 25 level in fantasy points per route run versus zone coverage already this year, even leading the team in target rate against both man and zone coverage. Yeah, him and Jaden Reed as well, I think are both in a great spot to kind of go off, because Jaden Reed, he's another one that's feasted against zone defenses this season, ranks second among all wide receivers who have run at least 25 routes against zone in fantasy points per route run. Almost basically all of his fantasy production has come against zone coverages, and the Rams, again, being one of the more zone heavy defenses in the league and not a great one. It's a nice spot for both of these guys. Okay, one of the players I wanted to highlight, maybe another one that comes as kind of an obvious choice considering the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver situation right now. And it's Xavier Worthy of the Kansas City Chiefs going against the New Orleans Saints. And the thing I wanted to highlight here is that not only I think is his production floor kind of lifted by all the injuries at the wide receiver position, but this is the kind of game where I think his ceiling could also be huge. The New Orleans defensive line owns the 5th longest time to pressure, 2.64 seconds, with the 5th lowest QB hit rate in the league at 4.8%. The Chiefs offensive line, they enter the week having given up the 7th lowest pressure rate on the season. And for me, this helps Worthy because when Patrick Mahomes is pressured this season, Worthy's only seeing a target rate of 2.9% on his routes without a single target that's 20 plus yards downfield. But then on non-pressure dropbacks, that's where Mahomes and Worthy are kind of their most dangerous. Worthy's target rate rises to 18.1%. That's even higher than Travis Kelce on the team. And then most importantly, on non-pressure dropbacks, Worthy's deep target rate soars to 30.8%, accounting for 4 targets, with only Rashee Rice having even 1 deep target in those situations. So it's been all Worthy when they're looking downfield. I think they're going to get more opportunities to do that this week. Patrick Mahomes, when he's given more than 2.5 seconds to throw, his percentage of air yards increases significantly from his norm being 39.8% air yards, which ranks 35th of 37 qualifying quarterbacks. And then it jumps to 71.2%, which is tied for the 3rd best mark among 36 qualifying quarterbacks when he has time to throw. So I think he's going to get that time to throw this week. I think Xavier Worthy is going to be on the receiving end of it. So just kind of one of those ceiling plays that I wanted to kind of highlight here. And then wanted to highlight another one of my favorite wide receiver options from the wide receiver man zone coverage report, George Pickens of the Pittsburgh Steelers going against the Dallas Cowboys. We talked about Justin Fields, loving him. George Pickens, wide receiver 29 on the year, did have his best game last week versus the Indianapolis Colts zone heavy defense, finished as wide receiver 15, but Dallas is another one of those zone heavy defenses. They're among the most heavy zone units in the league. And they rank 5th in defensive success rate from zone, but they are prone to creating or to giving up yardage. They rank in the bottom 10 in yards allowed per reception at 11.5 and yards allowed per coverage target at 8.5. So George Pickens ranks among the top 20 wide receivers in fantasy points per route run who have run at least 35 routes when facing zone coverage. And he's produced more than 85% of his fantasy points against zone coverage this season. So for me, he'll be in for another nice matchup here against Mike Zimmer's zone defense, and looking for him inside the top 15 this week as well.
So I looked at this one and because I wanted to put him in the matchups to avoid section, because I think that he's probably going to get shadow treatment from Diggs. But Pickens is just proving himself. And I'm someone who was really kind of out on Pickens for the first 2 years. He's really proving himself as a capable alpha player. And so I just did not want to make that bet. So I'm kudos to you for just pushing the chips in here with them. I think it'll be wide range of outcomes, but his ceiling is just killing it. So I support you on this one.
Yeah, no, it's a good call, and there is definitely outcomes too. Like there's even the chance that Pittsburgh just runs on Dallas like crazy because Dallas's run defense has been so poor, right? That they just take advantage of that matchup, and it's Arthur Smith. But for me, I really like George Pickens this week, and I think if they are going to pass the ball, he's absolutely going to be a big part of that, and like that one. All right, Nick, before we get into the wide receiver sits, hit us with a few quick hitters on some other defenses that we should potentially be able to exploit this week.
Okay, so first one is getting lost in my notes here. Green Bay Packers against the Los Angeles Rams. My notes are going spacey on me, so I'm just killing time as I get to where this section is. Apologies, dear listeners. So Green Bay Packers at Los Angeles Rams. I like both the pass and the run defense. Los Angeles, as we discussed, run a lot of zone coverage. Los Angeles owns the 6th highest explosive pass plays. Los Angeles zone coverage unit owns the 6th highest explosive pass plays allowed rate, the 3rd highest yards allowed per coverage snap, and ranks 2nd worst in both EPA allowed per play and positive EPA allowed rate. Among NFL run defenses, Los Angeles ranks 6th worst in EPA allowed per play, 5th worst in average depth of tackle, and has missed the 2nd most tackles. It's a pushover unit. I think Green Bay's kind of just going to be able to do what they want. I did include in here Green Bay's best target earners against zone coverage. Number 3, Jaden Reed. Number 2, Dontavian Wicks. Number 1, Bo Melton Faces. So that's with a minimum of 9 receiving snaps against zone coverage, and shout out to you, Matt Jester, for that one. But so Bo Melton, I don't think that you could start him in 12-team leagues, but I do think for folks in like large field GPP tournaments, what have you, I get it. If you want to put him in there as a very, very cheap flex, I get it with Bo Melton. He is talented. He's just stuck in a brutal receiving corps. So anyway, there we go. Green Bay Packers at Los Angeles Rams. Do you have anything you want to add there, John?
Nope, that works for me.
Okay. Baltimore Ravens at Cincinnati Bengals, both the pass defense and the run defense. The big thing here is that Cincinnati, so they've been down their 2 starting defensive tackles. Sam Hubbard, defensive end, revealed that although he's not on the injury report, he is dealing with a recurring hamstring injury that he expects to nag him through the season. So maybe a fine is coming down the pike there because he just told the NFL that he's not on the injury report, which is crazy. But anyway, there we go. Now, aside from that, their good defensive lineman who has been healthy, Trey Hendrickson, he suffered a stinger in his neck, and it was so bad that he was in a sling after the game last week. We don't know what his situation is, but this is basically the only pass rusher who's been doing anything for this team. If the whole defensive line is injured now, I think Baltimore is just going to be able to pick the poison. What I do like about the matchup is Baltimore's own coverage unit has not been very good this year. So have here at the very end of the article, Cincinnati's passing game components make for smart stacking partners facing a Baltimore pass defense, allowing the 7th most yards per coverage snap. I think Cincinnati's offense, I'm not breaking any news here, but I think Cincinnati's passing offense might be able to keep this game competitive, which could help reinforce Baltimore's passing volume. We won't know until it happens, and they do love to run the ball, but we're with Baltimore's passing game components. We're looking for opportunities where someone can reinforce their passing rate. I think that this is one of those games. Lastly, Chicago Bears versus Carolina Panthers pass and run defense. We've discussed previously that Carolina lost their best defensive player in Derek Brown. Well, this most recent week, they lost linebacker Shaq Thompson. I think it was a ruptured Achilles. He's out for the year, though, which is brutal. He ranks top 2 in tackles, stops, and tackles for loss or no gain among Carolina. Among NFL linebackers with at least 85 run defense snaps. So obviously he's the best second layer, or anyway, best run defender behind Derek Brown. Their passing defense woes are well documented at this point, which brings us to Caleb Williams, who is improving. He did not have a big time throw in weeks 1 and 2. He's up to a 3.6% rate in weeks 3 and 4. That's about middle of the pack for an NFL starter. I think that this is the type of matchup that Caleb Williams can exploit. However, we did see that Shane Waldron, when after being confronted by his entire offense, decided to run the ball a lot. What we learned from that was the 2 backs moving forward are DeAndre Swift, 16 rushing attempts, 7 targets, 63.9% touch rate, and Roschon Johnson, 7 rushing attempts, 0 targets, 38.9% touch rate. The backfield is condensed to those 2 guys. We'd like to see a little bit more volume from Roschon, but I think that both of them are startable. One is an RB2 and the other as like a 0 RB2. It's a very interesting matchup. I've outlined why, like Caleb, they might just take the air out of the ball and run a lot, but this is a matchup where they should be able to get the passing game going, and maybe if only to, grease the squeaky wheel that is DJ Moore, they'll do it. But I like it. It's a good matchup.
Nice. Yeah, those are some good calls. Definitely something to keep an eye on here heading into week 5. But should we talk some wide receiver sits now? So essentially wide receivers that we hate this week, Nick, and we'll go back to your wide receiver cornerback matchup article here for the players, the first few players here to avoid. And looking at the first name, Jakobi Meyers of the Las Vegas Raiders, who will face Patrick Surtain this week.
Yeah, so it does appear as though Devontae Adams is faking a hamstring injury. I can't stand behind that. I don't know that, but it certainly looks that way. Jakobi Meyers, so what happened last week was he went from being the primary slot receiver to being the primary or alpha on the perimeter. I had to take issue with this, but whatever. He is good. He's a good NFL receiver, and he can hold his own on the perimeter. I've bet against Pat Surtain more than once. And it's because this is the dichotomy that is Patrick Surtain. Oh, he's top 10 in explosive pass plays allowed rate and yards allowed per coverage snap. He is both number 1 in targeted rate, meaning he's dissuading quarterbacks from targeting him. And he also is dead last in catch rate allowed. And I know people on Twitter X like to get very angry about some of PFF's grades. And you look at Pat Surtain's grades and like it's not good. Well, it's because he's allowing 87.5% completion rate when he's being targeted. Now, of course, he's dissuading targets, so kudos to him. If you tell me that Jakobi Meyers at the end of this week finishes with 10 PPR points, he catches 5 of 5 for 50 yards, that would make sense given the way that Pat Surtain plays. But is that really what you want? Maybe from a specific type of starter. I think we want more ceiling guys, though. So this one, even though Jakobi Meyers is elevated to the number 1 pass catching role, I don't think this is the week that he's going to return big time value for you.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it makes sense, right? Like I get that there may be a temptation to plug Jakobi Meyers into a lineup with Devontae Adams out, but I highlighted this one in the wide receiver man zone report as well, out now on PFF.com. The Broncos have played the highest rate of man coverage this season. They haven't been amazing in it, but it's actually Trey Tucker that kind of stands out as like the likely next best wide receiver option. He ranks among the top 20 wide receivers who have run at least 30 routes in fantasy points per route run against man coverage, which is a significantly better mark than Jakobi Meyers, who's been really inefficient against man coverage this season. He ranks 85th in that regard. So he's got a decent target rate against man coverages. He just hasn't been able to find success there. And if he's getting Pat Surtain as well, like then, kind of forget about it. So I'm not as interested in Jakobi Meyers, but if I'm looking for a deeper play, I might consider Trey Tucker instead.
Cool.
All right. Next up for you on the wide receiver to avoid list, who you got, Nick?
Buffalo Bills wide receiver Mac Hollins versus Houston Texans cornerback Kamari Lassiter. So I looked at this one because it's got a high over-under, and I think people are going to want to get pieces of this. We're getting a little bit more data on Lassiter, and he now looks more like a good rookie rather than a really good starter. But Mac Hollins is just not a very good player. Matt Harmon likes to refer to these types of players as the sacrificial X, meaning they just go run a lot of cardio. Here's what I have on Mac Hollins. Among 63 NFL perimeter wide receivers with at least 55 perimeter receiving snaps, Hollins ranks 48th in target rate, 58th in yards per out run, and 62nd in drop rate, meaning he has a 25% drop rate, which is really, really high. He's a bad target owner, and when he does earn targets, he is screwing himself over. So I don't. If you want to get a piece of this one, I suggest looking elsewhere.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's Khalil Shakir. That's the guy that kind of stood out when I was writing up these guys. And Khalil Shakir has been excellent. You look at the Texans specifically, like they played a near average rate of man and zone coverages this season. Their strength being in man. They've been kind of below average in zone, but it hasn't really mattered for Khalil Shakir. He's kind of, the one that can do both. He's been really productive against both man and zone coverage this season. He ranks top 15 in fantasy points per route run among wide receivers across both coverage types. So I would definitely be looking at Khalil Shakir in fantasy lineups and DFS and all that kind of stuff if I could this week.
Cool. Last one.
Yeah.
So this one, yeah, some folks may be going, yeah, of course, but we're hitting the bye weeks, and you might be looking for a life raft here. Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster versus New Orleans Saints cornerback Alontae Taylor. Juju, I think, is the best bet to fill the starting slot role with Rashee Rice's undisclosed knee injury sidelining him. The problem is that Juju Smith-Schuster is catastrophically bad. And I had to go with a really wide sample size here because he just is so bad. He doesn't qualify for a lot of things. So among 98 NFL wide receivers with at least 55 receiving snaps, Smith-Schuster ranks outside the top 80 in target rate with a 6.9% rate. For example, for reference, Mac Hollins is bad and he's at like 13%. So 6.9 is terrible. He's outside the top 80 in yards per out run, and catch rate, he just doesn't have it anymore. And he's going to be probably in a starting role, but he can't play, and he has to go face Alontae Taylor, who last year was someone I kind of liked to pick on. He's a young player, but he is getting the job done now. Leads the league in slot coverage snaps, or is he second? He's top 2, whatever. Among 33 NFL slot defensive backs with at least 55 slot coverage snaps, Taylor ranks 16th in yards allowed per coverage snap, 13th in targeted rate, 6th in forced incompletion rate, and 4th in explosive pass plays allowed rate, grading out as the 6th best slot coverage defender. Not the week to try to find a flex start for Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah, no, we talked about him on the waiver wire show, and I'm basically we settled on kind of like a wait and see approach with Juju Smith-Schuster. Nate did a really good job kind of highlighting the pros and cons of whether or not we should trust him, and how it's fine to probably add him, but wait at least a week just to make sure. And yeah, I'm with you. This isn't necessarily the matchup that I'd like to be rolling him out there. Okay, for me, one of my key wide receivers to avoid has to be Jordan Addison of the Minnesota Vikings, going up against the New York Jets this week, where there's a few reasons to be concerned here. And I'll start with the less obvious one, which is in the trenches. So the Jets defensive line has generated a 39.5% pressure rate this season, which is the fourth best mark in the league. They also own the 4th best quick pressure rate at 26.9%. The Vikings offensive line has allowed a 32.5% pressure rate this season, which comes in as the 8th highest mark. So on pressure dropbacks this season, Sam Darnold has only targeted Jordan Addison on 13.3% of his routes. That's a drop off from his regular season average of 17.2% on non-pressure dropbacks. Addison also owns the highest average depth of target on the team, which makes those, potential targets when pressured also kind of less of a sure thing in terms of accuracy, which I think could kind of be proving to be the difference here when considering, this data and the elite cornerbacks of the Jets as well, right? So I know Jordan Addison coming off a pretty strong performance in week 4, 72 yards and a touchdown. This week kind of stands out as a more difficult matchup, not just for the matchup in the trenches, but drawing a combination of Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed are arguably the best cornerback duo in the league. So just want no part of that for this week. And then other than that, before we move on from the wide receivers, I did want to highlight some nuggets from the wide receiver man zone report here, quick hitter style. So first one is one that I'm treating as a wide receiver to avoid, and that's Xavier Legette of the Carolina Panthers going against the Chicago Bears. The Bears have deployed a zone coverage rate at a top 10 rate this season, and have done well from those looks. They rank in the top 5 in defensive success rate, first down plus touchdown rate allowed. They also place in the top 10 in yards allowed per coverage target. So they've been solid there, where Xavier Legette, one of those guys coming off a strong performance in week 4, which included a touchdown versus man coverage, but just hasn't been as efficient against zone. He ranks below average in fantasy points per route run in that regard. And I think it just could be a difficult matchup to trust the rookie this week in starting lineups. Next up, another situation, definitely not one that is avoidable, but, at least given reason to temper expectations. And that's the Bengals wide receivers against the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens have played a top 10 rate of man coverage, and they rank around average to slightly above average in yards allowed per coverage snap and yards allowed per coverage target. And they've surrendered just a 30.9% open target rate. That's the 3rd best mark in the NFL. So looking at the Bengals wide receivers, T. Higgins comes in below average in fantasy points per route run while facing man, despite leading the team in target rate in that regard. Jamar Chase also hasn't excelled against man this season, ranking closer to average in fantasy points per route run while placing last among the Bengals wide receivers in target rate against man coverage, players that have run at least 5 routes. Even Joe Burrow versus the Ravens, the last 3 games that he's played them, he's finished as QB 15, QB 21, and QB 25. So I know it's not like we can afford to bench Chase or Higgins in most leagues, probably even Joe Burrow, but for DFS/betting purposes, things like that, I just don't love the matchup for them. And then one more avoid for me, Tank Dell of the Houston Texans going against the Buffalo Bills. The Bills have played a top 10 rate of zone coverage this season and are among the better zone defenses in the league, tying for the best marks in yards allowed per reception and yards allowed per coverage target. Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, they've performed really well against zone coverage this season, but Tank Dell has kind of been the odd man out. Ranks just 86th in fantasy points per route run versus zone. Missed week 4. If he returns this week, not likely to be a strong start for me. And then just 2 wide receivers who I love as potential high-end options this week. They're already going to be starting for everyone anyways, but wanted to highlight them as kind of the high-end ceiling plays. The first one being Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints going against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs have played man coverage at an above average rate this season. They rank slightly below average in most team coverage metrics, including bottom 10 marks in yards allowed per coverage snap and explosive play rate allowed. Chris Olave is the only Saints wide receiver to produce anything against man coverage this season. He ranks 3rd among all wide receivers who have run at least 10 routes in fantasy points per route run against man coverage. He's commanded an elite 40% target rate facing man, and he's earned a top 5 PFF receiving grade against man coverage. So love the matchup for Chris Olave this week. And then the last one for me, certainly not least, maybe one of my favorite plays of the week is Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers going against the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals have played an above average rate of zone coverage this season, but they rank 31st in team coverage grade with a 45.6 and last in both defensive success rate and first down plus touchdown rate allowed. Deebo Samuel coming off a quiet week, probably his quietest game of the year, I think, after missing week 3. But I think primed to kind of explode this week in an ideal zone matchup. He's been one of the most effective wide receivers in the league against zone coverage. Ranks among the top 10 wide receivers who have run at least 35 routes in fantasy points per route run against zone. Also leads all wide receivers in PFF receiving grade against zone with a 90.8 and ranks 2nd in yards per route run against zone with a 3.63. So I am fully expecting Deebo to go off this week. Talked about really liking Brock Purdy as well. this is the kind of QB wide receiver stack I'm most invested in here in week 5. All right, let's take one more ad break, and then we'll talk some running backs, Nick. And want to give a shout out to LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/PFFfantasy. That's linkedin.com/PFFfantasy to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right. Running back time, Nick. I pulled this one from the O-line, D-line matchup article. That'll be out Friday morning. And you mentioned the Green Bay Packers potentially targeting the Los Angeles Rams defense already. And to me, Josh Jacobs also really stands out this week going against the Los Angeles Rams. So Josh Jacobs has failed to crack the top 20 running backs in any week so far this season. But this matchup, I think, is kind of lining up to be one of those better opportunities to deliver, potentially even landing a top 12 performance in week 5. And it's because he's getting one of the better matchups in the trenches this week, where the Packers offensive line has generated 1.8 rushing yards before contact per attempt. That ranks as the 6th best mark in the league, while the Rams defensive line has allowed 1.4 rushing yards before contact per attempt. That's a bottom 10 mark in the league. So when Josh Jacobs is given at least 1 rushing yard before contact, he ranks 6th among 43 qualifying running backs in yards per carry at 7.8. And then among those same circumstances and qualifying backs, Jacob ranks 4th in PFF rushing grade with a 91.4. So 9 explosive plays in those situations as well, which is 4th best. So again, I know it's been a quiet, relatively quiet start to his year given expectations, but I believe, we've even highlighted him before, but this is kind of the matchup where I think he should be fully able to take advantage of and come through with his best fantasy performance of the season.
This is great because I highlighted Emmanuel Wilson as grading out as a superior rusher and breaking tackles more efficiently over the last 2 weeks. And I still think he could be started as, flex option, what have you, depending on the roster construction. But I'd love to hear that for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, it's definitely been encouraging. I know he hasn't, blown up or had that huge week yet, but I think we could get that this week against the Rams. Okay, the other one that I wanted to highlight was from Nate's Start Sit article, which you could check out now on PFF.com. And a player that we highlighted on the waiver wire show this week as well, potentially immediately becomes a starting option for us. And that's Kareem Hunt of the Kansas City Chiefs going against the New Orleans Saints. I know we've talked about Carson Steele and liking him more for, the situation of being the potential lead back in this Kansas City offense and also having a pet alligator. But he's now lost 2 fumbles. He's an inexperienced rookie, just hasn't really been good enough to hold that role now that Kareem Hunt is in the mix. And as Nate points out in the article, even though Hunt didn't start last week, he still ran the ball 14 times for 69 yards. And Andy Reid spoke positively about him, stating that the team was okay with increasing his snaps. So Nate also highlighted the Saints defense and how they've been against running backs in previous games this season, where they didn't give up much rushing production against the Panthers or the Cowboys the first 2 weeks. And that was largely due to them winning blowouts. But then in week 3, Saquon Barkley ran 17 times for 147 yards against them. And then the 2 Falcons running backs combined for 15 carries for 88 yards against them. So Nate does highlight that there is at least some risk that Kareem Hunt, played only so much last week because Carson Steele fumbled. But again, it's one of those things where the risk is kind of worth it, considering there's also a chance that Hunt will see a lot of volume on a high-end offense. And in a week with 4 teams on a bye and with injuries piling up, Hunt is probably in that kind of low-end RB2 conversation this week. What do you think?
Carson Steele, man, I love you, buddy, but it's it looks like Kareem Hunt is just kind of taking over, and for those interested in the CEH, I don't think that he's going to return and do anything of note. So this is sort of just, he's a starter in an ostensibly efficient offense. So yeah, let's go ahead and start Kareem Hunt.
Yeah. Okay. And then I also pulled a running back sit from Nate's article, and it just so happens to be the same one from last week, but I think it's worth talking about again because Rachaad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers facing the Atlanta Falcons tonight. And as Nate points out, like the usage is kind of slowly slipping away. It's not to like catastrophic levels or anything like that, but considering White was playing at least 80% of the Buccaneers offensive snaps last season and was one of the more volume dependent backs in the league just because of how inefficient he was. Every snap matters for him specifically, right? So over the first 3 games, that snap share for White fell to 70 to 74%. And then as we've seen with Bucky Irving, he's just kind of flat out outplayed Rachaad White so far, which actually led to White's playing time dropping to 58% of offensive snaps last week. So that also included White seeing fewer snaps on early downs and in passing situations, which is huge for his fantasy value. Again, just being so dependent on volume for production because he hasn't been good. He's averaging 2.8 yards per carry this season, which is somehow worse than the 3.6 that he averaged last season. He's finished as a top 25 fantasy running back only in week 1. And a lot of that had to do with catching 6 passes for 75 yards. The Bucs facing the Atlanta Falcons in week 5 tonight, actually on Thursday Night Football. And as Nate points out, Atlanta has allowed just 27.5 receiving yards to running backs per game, despite having faced Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, and Jaylen Warren. So even if White doesn't necessarily lose more snaps this week, he probably isn't going to be worth starting. And then you factor in that he could also see less playing time. I don't know that it's worth trusting him right now.
Yeah, he's bad at running the ball.
Yeah, it's been
His
frustrating.
teammates good at it. And so, as for the receiving stuff, I think that Rachaad White, I still think that dynasty wise, this is a guy who's going to last in the league because he can play in the passing game, and he's 6 foot 215 or whatever. And that's coaches just like that sort of thing. Yeah. But for now, yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to trust him as anything more than like a PPR dependent RB3/4. It sucks. And if he's actually losing passing down snaps to Bucky, then we're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I like to have at least like one kind of spicy sit here. Last week I wasted it on Davante Adams, who didn't even end up playing. And for the record, even with the Davante Adams one last week, it's not suggesting like a full on sit in fantasy, but more kind of tempering expectations, right? Like the player that if I knew Davante Adams wasn't going to play last week, I would have taken my James Cook sit call from the O-line D-line article last week instead. So I'll jump to that article again for another running back to temper expectations for this week. And it's Breece Hall of the New York Jets going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, again, there aren't many fantasy teams that will have better options than Breece Hall. But when it comes to like, say, DFS and similar formats, kind of a matchup to avoid Breece Hall or at least temper expectations. And here's the thing. The Jets offensive line has generated just 0.3 rushing yards before contact per attempt. That's tied for the worst mark in the league. They also rank just 23rd in team run blocking grade. The Vikings defensive line has allowed just 1 rushing yard before contact per attempt, which is tied for the 3rd best mark in the league. Minnesota also as a team owns a 76.9 run defense grade, which ranks 2nd best in the NFL. And then Breece Hall specifically, when you look at him, when contacted 2 or fewer yards from the line of scrimmage, he owns a stuffed run rate of 31.9%. That's the 6th worst mark in the league among 52 qualifying running backs. And then among those same qualifiers and circumstances, Hall's first down and touchdown rate of 12.8% ranks just 33rd, while his 2.0 yards per carry ranks 42nd. So for me, combination of matchup, performance, even Braylon Allen potentially earning a larger role, like should be kind of enough to limit Breece Hall's production this week. So again, it's just a tempering of expectations. I don't want this to turn into kind of like a social media clip or something like that that's saying, sit Breece Hall and he's amazing. He very much has the potential to go off. But so far, the metrics and the matchup, it just doesn't add up this week. All right, Nick, our favorite segment that rolls off the tongue here, WD, WD, WO, WWW. What do we do with our waiver wire wins where we pick a couple of interesting names that likely came off waivers and figure out kind of how good or bad they might be as potential starters this week? So who's the first one that you've listed?
Yeah, so Chase Brown, who he's probably one of my favorite players of the year in terms of, guys who I was targeting. He's extremely efficient, and I'm sure he'll be efficient on his touches here, but he has not yet wrested control of the passing down work. And as such, he has to go to work against the Baltimore Ravens run defense. So for me, Chase Brown, comparing him to guys like Emmanuel Wilson or Jordan Whittington, like just guys who I've mentioned previously on the show, I think I'm going to bench Chase Brown in favor of those two guys. Baltimore Ravens ranked top 10 in run defense, EPA. Believe they have a very shallow average depth of tackle, and I'm filtering for that. And yeah, it's number 1 in the league. So they're stopping running backs within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage, not missing tackles. It's just a really, really difficult matchup for Chase Brown to go repeat his voluminous showing. Again, he'll be efficient, and maybe his newfound green zone rushing role, which he should have had the whole friggin' time, gets him there, and we don't have to worry about it. If you need a start, I get it. I do, because he's really talented, and that rushing, right up against the goal line that's a huge development. But it's a really tough matchup to follow up what he did last week, which is why we talked about him last week. But yeah, this one is rough.
Yeah, the RB6 finish last week was really nice, but I hate the matchup against the Ravens, and it was one of the reasons that I did include James Cook as a fade in the O-line D-Lab matchup article last week. It's not even so much the player as much as it is just the Ravens defense, right? Like you said, allowing the third fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. They have the third best run defense grade. They're allowing the fewest total rushing yards on the year, as well as the fewest rushing yards per attempt on the year, fewest rushing yards allowed after contact per attempt at 1.9. Like, I don't even see it necessarily being a game where Cincinnati can kind of afford to run the ball a ton, and even ripping off a big run on a smaller workload doesn't feel as likely. The Ravens have allowed just one explosive run all season for a 1.4% explosive run rate allowed. That came back in week 1, and it was Xavier Worthy's touchdown run. So by far, right, like they have the best mark in the league when it comes to allowing explosive runs. The next closest is 8.7%, the Minnesota Vikings. So the Ravens 1.4% is incredibly impressive. I'd be out on Chase Brown and Zach Moss this week. So yeah, not interested there. Okay, maybe we'll have some more luck with a different waiver wire running back this week. Jonathan Taylor still not practicing for the Indianapolis Colts, which leaves Trey Sermon as the potential lead back. So what do you think about Trey Sermon of the Colts this week?
So Jacksonville's run defense has been pretty decent overall, but their defenders are coming down with the injury bug. So Foyesade Oluokun, he ends up on injured reserve last week. Devin Lloyd, have you looked at what the official practice report is? So both Devin Lloyd and Josh Hines-Allen were on the injury report, which is, we're talking 3 front 7 starters. It doesn't look like their injury report for today has come out, but on Wednesday, Josh Hines-Allen in the concussion protocol did not practice today, with Devin Lloyd, knee injury, did not practice Wednesday. Now, Wednesday DNPs aren't that big of a deal, but Thursday certainly would be, and Allen progressing through the concussion protocol. I mean, that they could be down 3 front 7 starters, and Trey Sermon, not a great rusher, but they trust him. He's fine. But they trust him in the passing game. I think he's just a plug and play starter. If the front 7 continues to be injured, maybe let's say like one of the 2 guys does not suit up. I think that's a big swing for him. Jonathan Taylor, he's playing really coy. If you read his comments,
James Boyd asked him, and Taylor's response was, "What's today? Thursday, Friday, Saturday? So we got 48, really 72, but really 48 hours. So continuing to take it day by day." And it's like, dude, you got a high ankle sprain. I know it's mild, but so I was looking at Dr. Edwin Boris, his data. I think it was 30-some% of running backs who suffer a high ankle sprain don't miss any time. This is reportedly mild, but it's also this is his third ankle sprain, and they've all been to the same ankle. So I kind of don't think he plays. We'll see. Trey Sermon, this is a long way of me saying that I think Trey Sermon is startable against the Jaguars' injured defense. How about you, John?
Yeah, no, it's a good call, and I would bet on him not playing as well, if only because I'm desperate for him to play, because he's like one of my only options left in one league. So I don't think it's going to happen. I don't get that lucky, but like you said, Foye on IR, Devin Lloyd DNP with the knee, and Josh Allen's their best defensive player in the concussion protocol. We've seen this Colts coaching staff lean heavily on like Zach Moss last year, right? When Jonathan Taylor was out, I wouldn't be surprised to see them kind of do the same thing with Trey Sermon this week, assuming Jonathan Taylor's out. Like Jacksonville giving up the 7th most points per game to opposing running backs. They're the 10th best matchup according to our strength of schedule tool this week. Like he's kind of in that low end RB2 range for me this week, as well. It's a favorable matchup behind an elite offensive line. It's just a matter of, if the offense can get going with Anthony Richardson here, and obviously dependent on Jonathan Taylor's availability. So don't mind Trey Sermon at all. All right, let's wrap things up by talking a little defense and highlight your defensive special team streamers heading into week 5. Who do you like this week?
So Denver Broncos, mix of good and not so good players, but the scheme, you can't make any complaints about it. They are really, really effectively blitzing opposing offenses. They rank top 8. This is in terms of blitz data, top 8 in total pressures, quarterback pressure rate, pass rush productivity, and NFL sacks. Denver's coverage unit ranks 2nd in yards allowed per coverage snap and number 1 overall in explosive pass plays allowed rate. Might have to double check that because I think I wrote that right before Monday Night Football kicked off. But the point is they're very good, and they're facing the Las Vegas Raiders. So I don't think we overthink that one. They're DST1. Seattle Seahawks defense. Monitor the injury report here because they've been playing without, I think, 4 defensive front starters. It's really rough, but they're still fairly productive despite the circumstances, as we talked about earlier, facing the New York Football Giants, who among NFL offenses, New York ranks bottom 10 in success rate, EPA per play, explosive pass play rate, and explosive run play rate. They're not very good. Seattle secondary, one of the best in the NFL. If they can just get some of these guys in the front 7 back, which may be happening. Edge rusher Ikenna Nwosu and linebacker Jerome Baker both managed limited participant designations Friday or was that Saturday of last week. Right. So things are trending in the right direction for at least 2 of those guys. This defense is going to look a lot different a couple weeks from now as a very good unit. I think that they're very well coached. They're going to be good against the New York Giants. A note about Denver with the blitzing thing. I did look at Minnesota Vikings, and I skipped over this earlier, but I did look at the Vikings against the Jets. Aaron Rodgers pretty good against the blitz, and Garrett Wilson. This could be a Garrett Wilson bounce back week. I didn't put it in the wide receiver cornerback matchup to target, but I wanted to. He's very good against the blitz, and forget the other thing. He was also very good against zone. I think that Garrett Wilson will get the targets, and I know he's been aggravating fantasy managers. I think he's going to get the targets. So if you drafted him, you're keeping him in there. And then the other note that I wanted to mention, the New York Giants, they have found their starting slot cornerback in Andrew/Drew Phillips, but he's dealing with a calf injury. Adoree Jackson, the number 4 cornerback, also dealing with a calf injury. I think JSN, if neither of those guys are suiting up, I think JSN has another. If you look at his target totals, it's double-digit targets or less than 4, alternatingly every week. I think this could be a double-digit target week if Drew Phillips is out. Nick McLeod, fine backup, but he's not Drew Phillips. Anyway, handing it back over to you.
No, I like those calls. I'm with you. Yeah, JSN, nice matchup potentially here. Whether it's Andrew Phillips or Cordell Flott or whoever he faces, right? He's in for a good spot there. He's been really productive against man coverage, which the Giants have been using a little bit more this season, and they haven't been great. And then looking at this Seahawks defense, I mean, if the Giants are without Malik Neighbors as well, going through that concussion protocol, like that's about as bad as them basically playing without the football entirely, because considering how massive a part of an offense, their offense that he's been. So yeah, I'm definitely good to attack this Giants offense right now. And then I was looking at the numbers for Denver, and it's remarkable how good they've been. Like 3.9 yards per allowed, which is the best mark in the league. And it's not because of a lack of plays faced either. Like their league average in offensive plays against, they're the second most tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage. So that, I mean, shouldn't be hard to keep that up against Zamir White and Alexander Madison. They're allowing the third fewest first downs in the league. They're allowing the lowest EPA per play rate in the league, like you said, third lowest scoring drive rate allowed. And now the Raiders without Devontae Adams, like, yes, please, Denver all the way this week. So, yeah, great calls there. But that is going to do it for us today. Thank you all again for tuning in. As always, if you've enjoyed these episodes, please feel free to like, subscribe if you haven't already, or a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts helps us a ton as well. Nic, massive thank you to you for doing this with me once again. And before you go, please always remind everyone what you have going on at pff.com.
Yeah, so early in the week, QB/defense streamers of the week. Then we got the defenses to exploit after that. And then the wide receiver, we might be doing some changes with that, not sure. But after that, wide receiver, cornerback matchups to target and avoid. And then this lovely show. How about you, John? What do you got?
Yeah, for me, wide receiver man zone coverage report is out now, as well as the O-line D-line matchup article is going to be out Friday morning. IDP rankings, IDP fantasy report, those are out now as well. IDP start sit videos out on the YouTube and in the podcast feed. We got Nate's ranking start sit article as well. His recap articles are coming. And if you're watching the game tonight, if you're a PFF Plus subscriber, follow along on the in-game grading for the first time ever as well. Check out the snap counts and stuff as they happen. So that'll be a lot of fun to launch here this week. And yeah, excited to see how people kind of react to it. So good luck to everybody in week 5. And until next time, peace out.